Welcome, dear traveler, to Mystic Bedtime Stories, where ancient whispers meet peaceful slumber. I'm here to guide you on gentle journeys through time's forgotten corridors, to places where mystery and wonder still linger in the shadows of history. Tonight, as the world grows quiet around you, allow yourself to sink deeper into comfort, to let your breathing slow and steady as we embark on a voyage that will carry you across 7,000 years of silence. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders like morning mist rising from a tranquil river. Tonight's story will wrap around you like a soft blanket woven from starlight and ancient dreams, carrying you to a time when the world was younger, when the first villages dotted the landscape like scattered jewels along the mighty Danube River. Take a deep breath now and let it out slowly. Feel your body melting into your bed, becoming one with the peaceful darkness that surrounds you. In this sacred space between waking and sleeping, we're going to travel together to a land where symbols speak in languages we can barely remember, where clay holds secrets older than the pyramids, older than the great ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Picture, if you will, the gentle curve of the Danube as it winds through what we now call the Balkans. The year is approximately 5300 before the Common Era, and the morning mist is lifting from the river's surface like the breath of sleeping giants. Along these fertile banks, something extraordinary is happening, something that will challenge everything we think we know about the birth of human civilization. Here, in this peaceful valley, live people who have mastered the art of creating beauty from earth and fire. Their skilled hands shape clay into vessels of stunning elegance, their burnished surfaces gleaming like polished copper in the firelight. But these are not mere pots and bowls we're speaking of tonight. No, these artifacts hold within them one of archaeology's most tantalizing mysteries, a secret that has puzzled scholars for over a century. For carved into this ancient pottery, pressed into clay figurines, and etched onto tools and ornaments are symbols. Not random decorations, not simple geometric patterns, but deliberate, recurring marks that seem to whisper of meaning, of intention, of perhaps the earliest attempts at written communication in all of Europe. These are the Vinča symbols, and they may represent humanity's first steps toward literacy, predating the famous scripts of Sumer and Egypt by over 2,000 years. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, let your imagination carry you to those ancient workshops, where firelight dances on earthen walls and the soft sound of clay being shaped mingles with the distant murmur of the great river. Can you hear it? The quiet scraping of bone stylus against wet clay, the careful deliberation of an artisan creating not just a vessel, but perhaps encoding a message that would survive millennia, waiting patiently for us to decipher its meaning. Tonight, we'll walk together through this lost world, exploring the daily lives of people who may have been the first Europeans to develop a system of written symbols. We'll discover their sophisticated settlements, their advanced agricultural techniques, their remarkable artistic achievements. We'll examine the evidence that suggests these mysterious symbols might indeed represent the earliest form of European writing, and we'll ponder the tantalizing questions that remain unanswered to this day. But for now, let yourself drift a little deeper into relaxation. Feel your breathing becoming slower, more rhythmic, like the gentle lapping of ancient waters against a muddy bank. Allow the tensions of today to flow away from you like sediment settling to the bottom of a quiet pool. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are about to embark on a journey that will carry you through the night on currents of wonder and discovery. The Danube still flows today, just as it did 7,000 years ago, carrying its ancient secrets from the mountains to the sea. And along its banks, buried beneath layers of earth and time, lie the remains of Europe's oldest civilization, waiting to tell us their story. So settle back, dear listener, and let us begin this gentle exploration of the past, this quiet conquest of time itself, as we unravel the mystery of the Vinča symbols together. In just a moment, we'll step back through the corridors of time, past the rise and fall of empires, past the birth of written history, to a world where the first farmers were learning to shape not just the land, but perhaps language itself. We'll walk along riversides that knew no cities, through forests that had never heard the ring of iron on iron, to villages where the smoke from cooking fires carried the dreams of people who were, in many ways, very much like us. So breathe deeply once more, and feel yourself becoming lighter, more receptive to the gentle currents of this ancient story. Let your mind become like still water, ready to reflect the images of a world that existed when writing was as new and miraculous as starlight touching earth for the first time. The mystery of the Vinča symbols awaits, and with it, a night of peaceful wandering through one of humanity's most intriguing chapters. 7,300 years ago, when the world was painted in different colors and the rhythm of seasons marked the only calendar that mattered, the Danube River carved its ancient path through landscapes that would one day become Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria. But in those days, these were nameless lands, known only to the deer that came to drink at dawn and the waterfowl that nested among the reeds. The river moved then as it moves now, carrying snowmelt from distant mountains, nurturing the rich alluvial soil that would make this region one of Europe's first agricultural heartlands. Along its banks, where willows trailed their fingers in the slow current and wild grasses swayed in the morning breeze, something remarkable was beginning to unfold. Picture these river valleys in the soft light of early morning. Mist rises from the water's surface like the visible breath of the earth itself. The air is clean and sweet, carrying the scent of wild flowers and the rich loam of fertile soil. In this peaceful landscape, small groups of people have begun to settle, drawn by the river's promise of fresh water, fertile ground, and the countless fish that shimmer silver beneath the surface. These are the ancestors of the Vinča people, though they don't yet know the name that history will give them. They are farmers in humanity's childhood, still learning the ancient arts of cultivation and domestication. Their hands, weathered by work and darkened by sun, know the feel of seeds scattered on prepared earth, the weight of grain at harvest time, the warm comfort of animals that have learned to trust human care. Let yourself drift back with me to one of their early settlements, perhaps built on a low terrace overlooking the river's bend. Feel the soft earth beneath bare feet as we walk between simple houses built from timber and mud, their walls rising organically from the landscape like mushrooms after rain. Smoke drifts lazily from cooking fires, and the sound of children's laughter mingles with the lowing of cattle and the gentle clucking of domestic fowl. These people wake with the sun and sleep with the stars. Their days are measured not by clocks, but by the needs of crops and animals, by the changing patterns of weather and season. In spring, they plant barley and wheat, their most precious possessions carried in carefully woven baskets from the previous year's harvest. In summer, they tend their growing fields and gather wild foods from the forest and riverbank. Autumn brings the joy of harvest, the satisfaction of full granaries, and the security of another year's survival. Winter is a time for indoor work, for the careful crafts that make life beautiful as well as practical. The women of these settlements possess skills that seem almost magical in their precision. Watch as they take lumps of clay from the riverbank, clay that feels cool and plastic in their hands, and transform it through patient work into vessels of stunning elegance. Their pottery is not crude or primitive as one might expect from such ancient times. Instead, it displays a sophistication that speaks of generations of accumulated knowledge, of techniques passed from mother to daughter in an unbroken chain of creative wisdom. Feel the smooth surface of one of their bowls, burnished to a warm glow that reflects firelight like a pool of still water. Notice how perfectly balanced it feels in your hands, how the curve of the rim invites your lips, how the proportions satisfy some deep aesthetic sense that transcends time and culture. This is not merely functional pottery, but art created by people who understood that beauty is as necessary to human life as food and shelter. The men of these communities are equally skilled in their own domains. They know the secrets of working wood and bone, of creating tools that are both efficient and elegant. They understand the behavior of wild animals and the rhythms of the hunt. Some have begun to experiment with a new and mysterious technology, learning to extract pure copper from certain rocks and shape it into gleaming implements that surpass anything possible with stone alone. But perhaps most remarkably, these people have developed social structures of impressive complexity. Their settlements are not random clusters of huts, but carefully planned communities where each building serves a specific purpose, where the arrangement of houses and workshops reflects deep understanding of human needs and relationships. Archaeological evidence suggests they lived in large, extended families, sharing resources and responsibilities in ways that ensured the survival and prosperity of the entire group. As the evening settles over their village, families gather around cooking fires to share the day's harvest from field and river. Children listen wide-eyed to stories told by elders, tales that preserve the accumulated wisdom of their people. Young adults court one another with gift-giving and gentle teasing. Skilled craftspeople continue their work by firelight, hands moving with practiced certainty even in the dancing shadows. It is in these peaceful evening hours that something extraordinary begins to happen. Something that will echo down through the millennia to puzzle and fascinate us today. For as these ancient artisans work their clay, as they smooth and shape and perfect their creations, some among them begin to make marks, not random scratches or accidental impressions, but deliberate, meaningful symbols carved with careful intention into the surface of their pottery. At first, these marks might seem like simple decoration, geometric patterns meant to beautify the vessel. But look more closely, as archaeologists have learned to do, and you begin to see something more intriguing. These symbols repeat. They appear in specific combinations. They seem to follow rules, to exhibit the kind of systematic organization that suggests not random decoration, but deliberate communication. Breathe deeply and let this image settle into your consciousness. Ancient hands shaping clay by firelight, taking the time amid all their daily labors to inscribe mysterious symbols onto their creations. Were they marking ownership, recording transactions, preserving sacred knowledge? Or were they perhaps taking the first tentative steps toward that most human of achievements, the ability to capture thought and speech in permanent, visible form? The truth is, we may never know for certain what drove these ancient people to create their symbols. But what we do know is that they represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to communicate through written marks, perhaps the very beginning of literacy in Europe. These simple clay vessels, created beside a river that still flows today, may hold the key to understanding how our ancestors first learned to make their thoughts visible, to give permanent form to the fleeting patterns of speech and idea. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, let your imagination carry you to those ancient workshops, where the work of the day is ending and the symbols wait patiently on drying clay, holding their secrets until time and archaeology conspire to reveal them once more. Feel yourself drifting with the current of this ancient story, moving slowly downstream through time toward the moment when these mysterious marks will first catch the attention of modern scholars, sparking debates that continue to this day. The river flows on, carrying its burden of silt and memory, while along its banks, the first Europeans to create symbols sleep peacefully under stars that shine with the same gentle light that guides your rest tonight. The ancient symbols lay sleeping for millennia beneath layers of earth and forgetting, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal themselves to the modern world. Time moved like the slow current of the Danube itself, carrying seasons and centuries in its gentle flow, while the pottery fragments and clay figurines rested in darkness, holding their secrets close. It was not until the late 19th century, when Europe was transforming under the steam and steel of industrial progress, that these ancient voices would finally whisper their first words to contemporary ears. Picture, if you will, the autumn of 1875, when the countryside of Transylvania wore its golden cloak of changing leaves, and a remarkable Hungarian noblewoman named Zsófia Torma took up her archaeological spade for what would become one of history's most intriguing discoveries. Zsófia was an unusual figure for her time, a woman of independent spirit and scholarly mind who had devoted her life to understanding the ancient past. At her estate near the village of Tordos, in what is now Romania, she had noticed fragments of pottery emerging from the plowed fields, pieces that seemed far older and more sophisticated than anything the local peasants could explain. Drawn by an irresistible curiosity, she began the first systematic excavation of what would prove to be a Neolithic settlement of extraordinary importance. Let yourself drift back to those crisp autumn mornings when Countess Torma, wrapped in a practical wool coat against the morning chill, would arrive at her excavation site as the sun painted the hills in shades of amber and rose. Feel the texture of the earth beneath her careful tools, soil that had not been disturbed for thousands of years, still holding the imprint of ancient feet and the fragments of ancient lives. Day by day, layer by layer, she uncovered the remains of a sophisticated prehistoric culture. Her excavations revealed well-built houses with sophisticated heating systems, tools of copper and stone that spoke of advanced metallurgical knowledge, and pottery of such refined beauty that it challenged every assumption about prehistoric European capabilities. But it was the markings on these artifacts that would ultimately capture the imagination of the scholarly world. As Zsófia carefully cleaned each fragment, Brushing away the dust of millennia with the gentle touch of a conservator, she began to notice something extraordinary. Many of the pottery shards bore marks that were clearly intentional, symbols that had been incised, painted, or impressed into the clay before firing. These were not random scratches or accidental marks, but deliberate inscriptions that seemed to follow recognizable patterns. Breathe deeply and imagine her growing excitement as the significance of these discoveries became clear. Here, in the quiet hills of Transylvania, she had uncovered evidence of what might be Europe's earliest writing system, symbols created by people who lived and worked thousands of years before the pyramids were built, before the great libraries of Alexandria or Babylon had even been dreamed of. The symbols, she found, were varied and intriguing. Some resembled simple geometric forms, crosses and circles, triangles and lines arranged in deliberate patterns. Others were more complex, suggesting stylized representations of human figures, animals, or perhaps abstract concepts that we can barely imagine. Each pottery fragment seemed to tell a story, though in a language that had been lost to time. News of Zsófia's discoveries spread slowly through the archaeological community of Europe, carried by letters and scholarly journals to universities and museums, where learned men debated the implications of these ancient markings. Some dismissed them as mere decoration, the random doodlings of prehistoric potters. Others recognized their potential significance and began to wonder whether they might indeed represent humanity's earliest experiments with written communication. But it was not until the early 20th century that these mysterious symbols would receive the serious scholarly attention they deserved. As the old century died and the new one began, bringing with it new technologies and new ways of understanding the past, a Serbian archaeologist named Miloje Vasic would take up the torch that Zofia Torma had lit, carrying the investigation into even deeper waters of mystery and discovery. In 1908, as Europe stood on the brink of great changes, Vasic began his excavations at a site called Vinča Belo Brdo, located on a bluff overlooking the Danube just downstream from Belgrade. The location could hardly have been more perfect for an ancient settlement. The river provided water, transportation, and fertile soil, while the elevated position offered protection from floods and a commanding view of the surrounding landscape. Let yourself be carried on the morning mist to that archaeological site, where Vasic and his team worked with the methodical patience that good archaeology demands. Feel the weight of soil being moved bucket by bucket, the careful scraping of trowels against ancient surfaces, the moment of breath-held excitement when something significant emerges from the earth. What Vasic uncovered at Vinča would reshape our understanding of prehistoric Europe. Layer by layer, he revealed a settlement that had thrived for over 1,000 years. From approximately 5,700 to 4,500 years before our Common Era. The sophistication of this ancient community was breathtaking. Houses were built to standardized plans, with sophisticated hearths and storage areas. Streets followed regular patterns. Craft specialization was evident in the variety and quality of artifacts recovered. But most remarkably, scattered throughout these layers of ancient occupation, Vasic found hundreds of artifacts bearing the same mysterious symbols that had fascinated Zsófia Torma. Pottery vessels, clay figurines, bone tools, and stone implements all carried these deliberate markings. The sheer quantity of inscribed objects suggested that whatever these symbols represented, they were an integral part of daily life in this ancient community. As you rest here in the peaceful darkness, let your imagination follow the gentle rhythm of archaeological discovery. Picture Vasich in his field notebook, carefully sketching each symbol as it emerged from the earth, building a catalog of marks that would puzzle and intrigue researchers for generations to come. Feel the texture of ancient clay beneath scholarly fingers, the weight of mystery that each new discovery brought to light. The symbols he documented displayed remarkable consistency across different objects and different layers of occupation. Some appeared frequently, suggesting they might represent common concepts or frequently used words. Others were rare, perhaps indicating specialized or sacred meanings. Many seemed to appear in specific combinations, hinting at rules of syntax or grammar that governed their use. Month after month, year after year, Vasich continued his excavations at Vinča, uncovering not just individual artifacts, but the entire material culture of this sophisticated prehistoric society. His work revealed a people who had mastered not only the arts of farming and animal husbandry, but also advanced techniques of copper metallurgy, sophisticated pottery production, and apparently some form of symbolic communication that might represent the earliest writing system in Europe. The implications were staggering. If these symbols truly represented a form of proto-writing, they would predate the cuneiform scripts of Mesopotamia and the hieroglyphs of Egypt by over 2,000 years. Europe, long thought to have received the gift of literacy from the civilizations of the Near East, might instead have been the birthplace of written communication itself. Other archaeologists, inspired by Vasich's discoveries, began to investigate similar sites throughout the Balkans. At locations in Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, they found more examples of the mysterious symbols, always associated with the same sophisticated material culture, always dating to the same remarkable period of European prehistory. As the evidence accumulated, the scholarly world was forced to confront a new and revolutionary possibility. Perhaps the story of human civilization was more complex than anyone had imagined. Perhaps the first experiments with written communication had taken place not in the river valleys of Mesopotamia or the Nile Delta, but along the peaceful banks of the Danube, in villages whose inhabitants had left their messages for us to decipher across the vast gulf of time. The symbols continued to emerge from excavations throughout the 20th century, each new discovery adding another piece to an archaeological puzzle of extraordinary complexity. Some artifacts bore single symbols, others displayed elaborate compositions that might represent complete thoughts or even narrative sequences. The variety and sophistication of the markings suggested a system of communication that was both flexible and rule-governed, both practical and perhaps sacred. Yet, for all their careful documentation and analysis, the symbols remained stubbornly silent, their meaning locked away in a code that no modern scholar could crack. They whispered of ancient thoughts and vanished languages, of daily lives and sacred rituals conducted by people whose names were lost to time, but whose symbols survived to bridge the millennia between their world and ours. As we prepare to explore these remarkable symbols in greater detail, let yourself drift deeper into the peaceful current of this story. Feel your breathing becoming slower and more regular, like the patient rhythm of archaeological excavation itself. You are floating now between past and present, carried by the gentle flow of discovery toward even deeper mysteries that await our exploration. The symbols of Vinča have been awakened from their long sleep, brought back into the light by the patient work of scholars and archaeologists. But their story has only just begun to unfold, and their secrets remain as tantalizingly elusive as morning mist on the surface of an ancient river. In our next chapter, we will examine these mysterious markings more closely, exploring their forms and patterns, their possible meanings and interpretations, as we continue our gentle journey through one of archaeology's most fascinating mysteries. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in a quiet museum gallery, surrounded by glass cases that hold fragments of humanity's deepest past. The lighting is soft and warm, creating gentle pools of illumination that draw your attention to the ancient artifacts within. Here, arranged with scholarly care, are dozens of pottery shards, clay figurines, and bone implements, each bearing the mysterious markings that have puzzled researchers for over a century. Take a deep breath and let yourself move slowly from case to case, as if floating through this temple of ancient knowledge. Each symbol seems to whisper across the millennia, speaking in a language that hovers just beyond the edge of understanding. Some markings are bold and deeply carved, as if their creators wanted to ensure they would survive the passage of time. Others are delicate, almost tentative, like the first experimental words of a child learning to write. The most common symbols among the Vinča inscriptions are elegantly simple in their basic forms, yet profound in their implications. Picture the cross, not as a Christian symbol which would not emerge for thousands of years, but as one of humanity's most fundamental geometric expressions. These crosses appear in countless variations throughout the Vinča artifacts. Some are simple, formed by two lines intersecting at right angles. Others are elaborated with additional marks, flourishes, or accompanying symbols that suggest they might represent complex concepts rather than simple decorative elements. Let your mind drift over the smooth surface of an ancient bowl, following the carved lines of a cross that was inscribed by unknown hands 7,000 years ago. Feel the intentionality behind each mark, the deliberate decision to place this symbol in this precise location on this particular vessel. Was the cross a signature, identifying the potter who created this beautiful object? Was it a magical sign intended to bring good fortune to those who drank from this cup? Or was it perhaps a word, a concept captured in visible form, representing some idea that was central to the daily life of these ancient people? Moving through our imaginary gallery, you encounter another frequent symbol, the zigzag line that appears in various configurations throughout the Vinča corpus. These undulating marks seem to flow across the surfaces of pottery like frozen rivers, sometimes appearing alone, sometimes in combination with other symbols. Scholars have wondered whether these zigzag patterns might represent water, the life-giving element that was so central to the existence of these river valley communities. Or perhaps they symbolize the serpent, a creature that appears frequently in the religious iconography of many ancient cultures. The rhythm of these zigzag patterns is almost hypnotic as you trace them with your eyes. Feel yourself swaying gently with their undulating flow, like reeds moving in a river current. Each curve and angle was carefully planned and executed by an ancient artisan who understood that these marks carried meaning beyond their simple beauty. The repetition of the pattern across multiple artifacts suggests that this was not random decoration, but a deliberate symbolic system with recognized significance. Among the geometric symbols, triangles appear with remarkable frequency, sometimes standing alone, sometimes arranged in complex patterns that suggest deliberate composition. These triangular forms vary in size and orientation, some pointing upward like mountain peaks or flames reaching toward the sky, others pointing downward like the roots of trees seeking nourishment in the earth. Archaeological interpretation suggests that these opposing triangular forms might represent fundamental dualities, perhaps male and female principles, earth and sky, or other paired concepts that structured the worldview of the Vinča people. Allow yourself to contemplate these ancient triangles, feeling the stability and strength inherent in their three-sided form. This is one of the most basic geometric shapes, appearing in human art from the earliest times, yet in the Vinča symbols, it seems to carry meanings that go far beyond simple decoration. The careful placement of these triangular marks on pottery and figurines suggests they were significant symbols in the religious or social system of these ancient communities. But perhaps the most intriguing of all the Vinča symbols are those that seem to represent human figures, animals, or objects from the natural world. These pictographic elements bridge the gap between abstract symbolism and recognizable imagery, offering tantalizing hints about how these ancient people viewed their world and their place within it. Picture a small clay figurine, perhaps once used in religious ceremonies or kept as a protective talisman. Carved into its surface is a symbol that clearly represents a human form, simplified to its essential elements but unmistakably anthropomorphic. The figure might be shown in a dancing pose, arms raised to the sky, or in a seated position that suggests meditation or ritual concentration. These human figures appear throughout the Vinča symbol system, sometimes alone, sometimes in groups that might represent family relationships, community gatherings, or religious ceremonies. Animal forms also populate the Vinča symbolic vocabulary, though often rendered in such stylized fashion that their exact identification remains a matter of scholarly debate. Some symbols clearly represent birds, their wings spread in flight or folded in rest. Others might depict four-legged creatures, possibly domesticated animals like cattle or sheep, or wild animals that held special significance in the spiritual life of these communities. Let your imagination carry you to the moment of creation, when an ancient artist decided to capture the essence of a bird in flight by carving its simplified form into wet clay. Feel the satisfaction of that prehistoric artisan as the symbol took shape beneath their tool, transforming an abstract idea into a permanent visual form that could communicate across time and space. Celestial symbols also appear among the Vinča inscriptions, circles that might represent the sun or moon, and combinations of circles and lines that could symbolize stars or planetary movements. These astronomical references suggest that the Vinča people were careful observers of the heavens, perhaps using celestial cycles to organize their agricultural activities or religious observances. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Vinča symbol system is the way individual symbols combine to form more complex compositions. On many artifacts, symbols appear not in isolation, but in groups that suggest grammatical relationships or narrative sequences. A cross might be accompanied by a zigzag line and a circle, creating what appears to be a sentence or phrase in this mysterious ancient language. Scholars have documented nearly 700 different symbolic variations within the Vinča corpus, a number that suggests considerable complexity and flexibility within the system. This rich vocabulary of marks and meanings implies that the symbols were not merely decorative elements or simple ownership marks, but components of a sophisticated communication system that could express a wide range of concepts and relationships. The patterns of symbol distribution across different types of artifacts also provide clues about their possible meanings. Certain symbols appear predominantly on pottery used for food preparation or storage, suggesting they might relate to concepts of nourishment, abundance, or domestic life. Others are found primarily on figurines that may have had religious or ritual significance, implying sacred or spiritual meanings. As you float through this gallery of ancient symbols, notice how some markings appear to have been added after the pottery was fired, suggesting they might record specific events or transactions rather than general concepts. These post-firing inscriptions hint at a dynamic system of communication that could be used for record keeping, storytelling, or other practical applications. The craftsmanship evident in these symbolic inscriptions is remarkable for its precision and intentionality. Each mark was carefully planned and executed, often requiring considerable skill to achieve the desired effect. Some symbols were incised into wet clay before firing, becoming permanent parts of the ceramic surface. Others were painted with colored pigments, creating visual effects that must have been striking when the artifacts were new and bright. The consistency of symbolic forms across different archaeological sites and time periods suggests that this was not a local phenomenon, but a widespread system of communication that was shared among communities throughout the Danube Valley. This geographic distribution implies that the symbols represented a common cultural language, a shared way of encoding and transmitting meaning that transcended individual settlements or family groups. Yet, for all their careful documentation and analysis, these ancient symbols remain tantalizingly silent, their meanings locked in a code that no modern scholar has been able to crack completely. They speak to us across the millennia in a language we can sense but cannot fully understand, like hearing a conversation in a distant room where individual words remain indistinct but the emotional tone is unmistakable. Some researchers believe that the Vinča symbols represent a true writing system, complete with phonetic elements that could record the sounds of spoken language. Others argue that they constitute a proto-writing system, a symbolic communication method that could convey meaning, but had not yet developed the complexity necessary for full linguistic representation. Still, others suggest that the symbols served primarily religious or magical functions, encoding sacred knowledge that was never intended for everyday communication. The debate continues to this day, fueled by new discoveries and refined analytical techniques that bring us ever closer to understanding these mysterious marks. Each new fragment of inscribed pottery, each additional symbol added to the corpus, brings fresh hope that we might finally crack the code of Europe's earliest symbolic communication system. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, let these ancient symbols dance behind your closed eyelids like fireflies in a summer evening. Feel yourself drifting deeper into the peaceful current of this story, carried by the rhythm of discovery and wonder toward even greater mysteries that await our exploration. The symbols of Vinča continue to whisper their secrets across the vast expanse of time, patient as the river that flows beside the villages where they were born, enduring as the human desire to capture thought in permanent, visible form. In our next chapter, we will delve deeper into the chronological mysteries surrounding these remarkable symbols, exploring the evidence that suggests they may indeed represent humanity's earliest experiments with written communication, predating even the famous scripts of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Time moves differently in the realm of archaeology, where moments stretch into millennia and the turn of a single season can represent the difference between civilizations. As you rest here in the gentle darkness, let yourself drift back to the middle of the 20th century, when a revolutionary new technique was about to transform our understanding of the ancient world and cast the mystery of the Vinča symbols in an entirely new light. Picture the laboratory of Willard Libby at the University of Chicago in the years following World War II, where the secrets of atomic science were being turned toward peaceful purposes. The air hums with the quiet intensity of scientific discovery, and in this sterile, well-lit space, a technique is being perfected that will allow archaeologists to peer back through time with unprecedented precision. This is the birth of radiocarbon dating, the method that measures the decay of carbon-14 isotopes to determine the age of organic materials with remarkable accuracy. Feel the anticipation that must have filled archaeological circles as news of this breakthrough spread through universities and museums around the world. For the first time in human history, scholars would be able to assign absolute dates to ancient artifacts, replacing educated guesswork with scientific certainty. The implications were staggering, particularly for prehistoric archaeology, where the absence of written records had made precise dating nearly impossible. When the first Vinča artifacts were subjected to radiocarbon analysis in the 1960s and 1970s, the results sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The dates that emerged from those careful laboratory measurements challenged everything that scholars thought they knew about the development of human civilization. Instead of the expected ages of 3,000 or 4,000 years, the carbon-14 tests revealed that the Vinča culture had flourished between approximately 5,300 and 4,500 years before the Common Era. Let that timeline settle into your consciousness like sediment drifting to the bottom of a quiet pool. 7,000 years ago, when the world was younger and the pace of change measured in centuries rather than years, the people of the Danube Valley were creating their mysterious symbols. This places their symbolic system not merely among the earliest writing systems known to archaeology, but actually preceding the development of cuneiform script in Mesopotamia by over 2,000 years. Breathe deeply and allow yourself to contemplate the magnitude of this discovery. The cuneiform tablets of ancient Sumer, long considered humanity's first venture into written communication, date to approximately 3,200 before the Common Era. The hieroglyphic inscriptions of early dynastic Egypt emerged around the same period. Yet here, in the peaceful river valleys of southeastern Europe, people were creating systematic symbols that might represent writing nearly 2 millennia before these famous scripts appeared in the Near East. The implications of these radiocarbon dates were profound and controversial. If the Vinča symbols truly represented a writing system, then the entire narrative of human civilization would need to be rewritten. Europe, long thought to have been a cultural backwater during the Bronze Age, populated by simple farmers and herders who learned the arts of civilization from their more advanced neighbors to the south and east, might actually have been the birthplace of humanity's most important intellectual achievement. Picture the scholarly debates that erupted in conference halls and academic journals as archaeologists grappled with this revolutionary possibility. Some embraced the new evidence enthusiastically, seeing it as confirmation of Europe's previously unrecognized contribution to human development. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether the Vinča symbols truly constituted a writing system or merely represented a sophisticated but pre-literate symbolic communication method. The controversy centered on fundamental questions about the nature of writing itself. What distinguishes true writing from other forms of symbolic communication? Must a writing system be able to record the full range of spoken language, or can it be considered writing if it captures only certain types of information? These questions, which might seem abstract and academic, carried profound implications for our understanding of how human consciousness and communication evolved. As you float through this gentle current of discovery and debate, let yourself consider the extraordinary preservation of these ancient dates. The organic materials that allowed radiocarbon dating to work its magic had survived for over 7,000 years, protected by the particular conditions of soil and climate that characterized the archaeological sites along the Danube. Charcoal from cooking fires, bones from ancient meals, fragments of wood from long collapsed buildings. All had preserved within their molecular structure the precise record of when they had ceased to live, waiting patiently for a 20th century science to read their testimony. The radiocarbon dates were confirmed by additional lines of evidence that painted a consistent picture of remarkable antiquity. Pottery styles characteristic of the Vinča culture could be traced through stratigraphic layers that showed clear developmental sequences spanning nearly a millennium. The gradual evolution of ceramic techniques and decorative motifs provided an independent chronological framework that supported the radiocarbon evidence. Archaeological sites throughout the Balkans yielded similar date ranges, suggesting that the symbolic communication system represented by the Vinča signs was not a local phenomenon, but part of a widespread cultural tradition that flourished across southeastern Europe during the 6th and 5th millennia before our era. The geographic distribution of similar symbols, from the Carpathian Mountains to the Aegean Sea, implied a level of cultural communication and standardization that seemed almost impossible for such an early period. Yet the more evidence that accumulated, the more compelling the case became. Site after site yielded artifacts bearing the mysterious symbols, and date after date confirmed their extraordinary antiquity. The Vinča culture emerged from these investigations as a sophisticated Neolithic society that had achieved remarkable advances in agriculture, metallurgy, and perhaps written communication thousands of years before similar developments occurred in other parts of the world. The dating evidence also revealed the longevity of the Vinča tradition. Rather than being a brief experiment that quickly disappeared, the symbolic system appears to have been in continuous use for nearly 800 years, spanning roughly 30 generations of prehistoric Europeans. This longevity suggests that the symbols served important functions within Vinča society, functions significant enough to ensure their preservation and transmission across centuries of cultural change. Consider the implications of this temporal depth as you rest in the peaceful darkness. 30 generations of ancient Europeans were born, lived, and died while this symbolic tradition remained active and meaningful within their communities. Children learned the symbols from their parents and grandparents, adding their own innovations and interpretations while preserving the essential core of the system. This represents not a single moment of inspiration, but a sustained cultural achievement that endured longer than many historical civilizations. The radiocarbon dates also provided new perspectives on the relationship between the Vinča culture and contemporary civilizations in other parts of the world. While the people of the Danube Valley were creating their sophisticated symbols and building their well-planned villages, Egypt was still in its prehistoric period, with pharaonic civilization still thousands of years in the future. Mesopotamia was populated by small farming communities that had not yet developed the urban complexity that would characterize later Sumerian civilization. This chronological framework forced archaeologists to reconsider long held assumptions about the diffusion of cultural innovations. The traditional model had suggested that advanced developments like writing, metallurgy, and urban planning had originated in the Near East and gradually spread to other parts of the world. But the Vinča dates implied that European societies might have been developing these innovations independently, perhaps even earlier than their counterparts in other regions. The precision of radiocarbon dating also allowed researchers to track changes within the Vinča symbolic system over time. Early examples of the symbols appeared simpler and less standardized, while later specimens showed greater complexity and systematic organization. This developmental pattern suggested that the symbolic system had evolved and matured over the centuries, growing from simple beginnings into a sophisticated communication method that might have been capable of recording complex information. As our exploration of these chronological mysteries draws toward a close, let yourself drift deeper into the peaceful current of time that carries all human achievements. Feel the vast span of years that separates us from those ancient symbol makers, yet also sense the continuity of human creativity and ingenuity that connects their world to ours. The same impulse that drove them to capture meaning in permanent, visible form continues to inspire us today as we struggle to decipher their ancient messages. The radiocarbon dates that revolutionized our understanding of the Vinča symbols remind us that human achievement often exceeds our expectations and assumptions. In quiet river valleys where simple farmers tended their crops and shaped their clay, innovations were taking place that would challenge our understanding of civilization's origins thousands of years later. These ancient Europeans, whose names are lost to time, but whose symbols survive to puzzle and inspire us, may have taken humanity's first steps toward literacy, in an age when the world was still learning the fundamental arts of civilization. As you continue to drift peacefully through this story, carried by the gentle current of discovery and wonder, prepare yourself for our next chapter, where we will explore the daily lives of the Vinča people, imagining how these mysterious symbols might have functioned within their sophisticated prehistoric society. Let yourself drift back now through the morning mist of time, 7,000 years into the past, to a world where the rhythm of seasons marked the only calendar that mattered, and the great river Danube flowed through landscapes untouched by the complications of modern life. Picture yourself approaching one of the great Vinča settlements just as the sun rises over the eastern hills, painting the sky in gentle shades of rose and gold that reflect in the calm waters of the river below. The village spreads before you like a carefully planned garden, its houses arranged with a sophistication that speaks of deep understanding of human community and natural harmony. These are not the crude huts that stereotypes of prehistoric life might suggest, but substantial dwellings built with skill and artistic sensibility that would impress even modern architects. Feel the morning coolness on your skin as you walk along the settlement's well-defined pathways, breathing air that carries the mingled scents of cooking fires, fertile earth, and the clean freshness of the nearby river. The houses rise around you like gentle hills emerging from the earth itself, their walls constructed from timber frames filled with carefully mixed clay and organic materials that create structures both durable and beautiful. Many of these dwellings are remarkably large, suggesting that extended families live together in harmonious, multi-generational communities where knowledge and responsibilities were shared across different age groups. The roofs, thatched with reeds from the riverbank, slope gracefully toward the ground, giving each house the appearance of a living thing that has grown naturally from the landscape. As you move through this peaceful settlement, notice how each house displays its own character while fitting harmoniously into the overall plan of the community. Some dwellings feature elaborate decorative elements, their clay walls painted with geometric patterns in earth tones that echo the symbols we have been exploring. Others are simpler but no less elegant, their beauty emerging from perfect proportions and careful craftsmanship rather than ornate decoration. The doorways of these ancient homes beckon with mysterious warmth, inviting you to imagine the lives that unfolded within their walls. Step across the threshold of one dwelling and feel the coolness of the interior, where carefully designed hearths provide both warmth and light, while sophisticated ventilation systems carry smoke away through ingeniously placed openings. The floors, made of carefully prepared clay, are smooth beneath your feet, worn by countless generations of daily activity into surfaces that gleam softly in the firelight. Storage areas line the walls of these prehistoric homes, carefully organized spaces where the fruits of field and craft were preserved against times of scarcity. Large ceramic vessels, their surfaces often decorated with the mysterious symbols we have been studying, hold grain harvested from the fertile fields surrounding the settlement. Other containers preserve dried fruits, nuts gathered from nearby forests, and fish caught in the abundant waters of the Danube and its tributaries. Picture the daily routine of a Vinča household as the family awakens to greet another day in their sophisticated prehistoric world. The mother of the family, her hands skilled from years of practice, tends to the cooking fire while planning the day's meals from the abundance stored within her well-organized home. Her children gather around, learning through observation and gentle guidance the countless skills they will need as adults in this complex society. The father prepares for his day's work in the fields that surround the settlement, fields where the Vinča people had mastered advanced agricultural techniques that supported population densities remarkable for their time. These ancient farmers understood crop rotation, soil management, and selective breeding of both plants and animals in ways that sustained their communities for nearly a millennium without exhausting the natural resources upon which they depended. As the morning progresses, the settlement comes alive with purposeful activity that speaks of a highly organized society where each person had specific roles and responsibilities. In specialized workshops scattered throughout the community, master craftspeople pursue their trades with skills that rival those of much later civilizations. The potter's workshop fills with the rhythmic sound of hands shaping clay on wheels that represent one of humanity's earliest mechanical innovations. Watch as the potter, her movements flowing like a meditative dance, transforms formless clay into vessels of stunning beauty and perfect functionality. Her hands know the exact pressure needed to raise the walls of a bowl, the precise timing required to achieve the lustrous surfaces that characterize Vinča pottery. But most remarkably, as she works, she pauses periodically to inscribe symbols onto the wet surface of her creations. Marks that carry meanings we can only guess at, but which clearly served important purposes within her community. These symbols appear not as afterthoughts or mere decoration, but as integral parts of the creative process. The potter considers each mark carefully, sometimes consulting with other members of her workshop, sometimes referring to examples of previous work that display similar symbolic elements. The deliberate nature of this process suggests that the symbols served specific communicative functions, perhaps identifying the potter, the intended use of the vessel, or the ceremonial or practical purposes for which it was created. Move through the settlement to the workshop of the metalworker, where another kind of magic transforms raw materials into objects of practical and artistic value. The Vinča people were among Europe's earliest masters of copper metallurgy, developing techniques for extracting and working metal that would not be matched in many parts of the world for thousands of years. The forge glows with intense heat, and the rhythmic hammering of metal on anvil creates a percussion that echoes through the settlement, like the heartbeat of technological innovation. The metalworker, his arms strengthened by years at the forge, shapes copper into tools, ornaments, and ceremonial objects that display both functional excellence and artistic sophistication. Some of these metal objects also bear symbolic inscriptions, marks that were added during the manufacturing process with the same careful attention to meaning and placement that characterizes the symbols on pottery and other artifacts. In another part of the settlement, skilled weavers work with fibers from both cultivated plants and domesticated animals, creating textiles that, while they have not survived the millennia, must have been remarkable for their quality and beauty if they matched the sophistication evident in other Vinča crafts. The rhythmic clicking of looms provides another layer to the complex symphony of sounds that characterizes daily life in this prehistoric community. As the day progresses toward its midpoint, the settlement's children can be seen engaged in activities that blend play with education, learning the skills they will need as adults while enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood that transcend all cultures and time periods. Some help their parents with age-appropriate tasks, learning through participation the complex knowledge systems that sustained their sophisticated society. Others engage in games that develop the physical and mental abilities they will need as contributing members of their community. The children's laughter mingles with the sounds of adult work, creating an atmosphere of harmony and purpose that suggests a society where the needs of all members were understood and valued. In their play, these young Vinča people sometimes imitate the symbolic activities of their elders, scratching marks in the earth or on scraps of clay in unconscious rehearsal for the day when they too will participate in their culture's mysterious system of symbolic communication. Midday brings a pause in the intensive work activities as families gather for their main meal, sharing food prepared from the diverse resources available in their river valley environment. The Vinča diet was remarkably varied and nutritious, including cultivated grains, legumes, and vegetables supplemented by wild plants gathered from forests and wetlands, fish from the river, and meat from both domesticated animals and successful hunts. Picture the warmth of these family gatherings, where food is shared not just as physical nourishment, but as an expression of community bonds that held Vinča society together across the centuries. Conversation flows around the meal, carrying information about weather patterns, crop conditions, and community concerns, but also stories, jokes, and the countless small observations that make up the texture of daily life in any human society. Some of these meal vessels bear symbolic inscriptions that may have had ceremonial or practical significance in the context of food sharing and community gathering. Perhaps certain symbols indicated the appropriate use of specific vessels or marked containers that were reserved for special occasions or ceremonial purposes. The integration of symbolic communication into the most basic activities of daily life suggests that literacy or proto literacy had become deeply embedded in Vinca culture. As afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, different types of activities take precedence in the settlement. This is the time for longer term projects, for the planning and coordination that kept this complex society functioning smoothly across generations. Community leaders, whose authority seems to have been based more on knowledge and skill than on inherited power, meet to discuss matters of common concern and to coordinate the various specialized activities that sustained their civilization. The evidence suggests that Vinca society was remarkably egalitarian for its time, with leadership roles distributed among individuals who had demonstrated particular expertise in essential areas like agriculture, craft production, or resource management. The symbolic communication system may have played important roles in these administrative activities, serving as a method for recording decisions, tracking resources, or preserving important information across time. Evening approaches with the gradual dimming of light that signals the end of another day in this peaceful prehistoric world. Work activities wind down as families prepare for the evening meal and the social activities that would occupy the hours before sleep. This is the time for storytelling, for the transmission of cultural knowledge from older to younger generations, for the songs and ceremonies that reinforced community bonds and preserved traditional wisdom. Picture the warm glow of firelight dancing on the walls of Vinca homes as families gather around their hearths for these evening activities. The flickering flames illuminate faces intent on stories that carry the accumulated wisdom of countless generations, tales that preserve not just entertainment, but essential information about survival, morality, and the proper relationships between humans and the natural world that sustain them. In this firelight, the symbols on pottery vessels and clay figurines seem to come alive, their meanings dancing in the interplay of light and shadow, like visible manifestations of the spoken words that fill the evening air. Perhaps some of these symbols served as memory aids for storytellers, visual cues that helped preserve the complex narratives that maintained cultural continuity across the centuries. As night deepens over the settlement, the last activities of the day wind towards their conclusion. Children are settled into sleep with gentle songs and soft words, their dreams populated by the images and stories that will shape their understanding of their place in the world. Adults complete their final tasks and preparations for the following day, secure in the knowledge that their sophisticated society provides both material security and spiritual meaning for all its members. The night watchmen take up their positions, guardians who ensure the safety of the sleeping community while maintaining the fires that will provide warmth and light through the dark hours. In the peaceful darkness, the symbols on Vinca artifacts wait patiently for morning light to reveal them once again, holding their ancient secrets with the same patience that has characterized their 7,000-year journey through time. As you rest here in your own peaceful darkness, let the rhythm of this ancient life settle into your consciousness like a gentle lullaby. Feel the continuity between that prehistoric world and our own, the common humanity that connects us across the vast spans of time. The Vincha people, with their sophisticated society and mysterious symbols, remind us that human ingenuity and creativity have been constant companions throughout our species' long journey through history. Their daily lives, so different from ours in their details, but so familiar in their fundamental concerns for family, community, and meaning, speak to universal human needs that transcend any particular time or place. As you drift deeper into the peaceful current of this story, carry with you the image of firelight dancing on ancient symbols, of skilled hands shaping clay, while encoding meaning in marks that continue to puzzle and inspire us thousands of years after their creation. In our next chapter, we will expand our view beyond individual settlements to explore the broader network of communities that made up Vincha civilization, discovering how trade and communication linked these prehistoric Europeans in ways that anticipated much later developments in human organization and cultural exchange. Rise now above the individual settlement where we have spent our evening, floating gently upward like morning mist ascending from the river's surface, until you can see the broader landscape that cradled the Vincha civilization. From this ethereal vantage point, the true scope of their achievement becomes visible, stretching along the Danube's meandering course like a necklace of gleaming pearls strung on the silver thread of the great river. The Danube in those ancient times was not merely a source of water and fish, but the great highway of southeastern Europe, a liquid road that connected communities across hundreds of miles of varied terrain. Its current carried not just silt and seasonal floods, but ideas, innovations, and the precious materials that made possible the sophisticated culture we have been exploring. Let yourself drift along this ancient waterway, feeling its gentle current beneath you as we visit the great centers that rose along its banks like flowers blooming in a vast prehistoric garden. Breathe deeply and allow yourself to descend toward the largest of these settlements, the great center known to archaeologists as Vincha Belo Burdo, which gave its name to the entire cultural complex. This remarkable site, perched on a prominent bluff overlooking the Danube just downstream from what would one day become Belgrade, was one of Europe's earliest urban centers, a place where perhaps 2,000 people lived and worked in a community that rivaled the great cities of much later civilizations. Picture yourself walking through the broad avenues of this prehistoric metropolis in the soft light of early morning, when the cooking fires are just being kindled and the day's activities are beginning to stir throughout the settlement. The scale of this place is breathtaking for its antiquity. Houses stretch in orderly rows along carefully planned streets, their clay walls rising to impressive heights, their interiors spacious enough to accommodate the complex activities of extended families and craft specialists. The central area of the settlement reveals the remarkable organizational abilities of the Vincha people. Here, larger buildings serve as workshops for the most skilled artisans, their interiors designed specifically for the demanding work of pottery production, metalworking, and other specialized crafts. Storage facilities of impressive size speak to the community's ability to accumulate and manage surplus resources, while ceremonial areas suggest the existence of complex religious or social institutions that bound the community together. But perhaps most remarkably, evidence of symbolic communication appears throughout the settlement. Pottery fragments bearing the mysterious Vincha script are found in virtually every excavated area, suggesting that literacy or proto-literacy was not confined to a small elite, but was widely distributed throughout the community. Feel the significance of this as you imagine walking past workshops where ordinary craftspeople routinely inscribed symbols onto their creations, where symbolic communication was as natural and integrated into daily life as speaking or breathing. Now, let your spirit float gently downstream along the Danube's ancient course, carried by currents that once bore the wooden boats of Vinča traders on their journeys to distant communities. Feel the river's patient rhythm beneath you as you pass other major settlements that dotted the prehistoric landscape like stepping stones across time. Each community you encounter displays the characteristic features of Vinča civilization, yet each also shows unique variations that speak to local innovations and regional specializations. The settlement at Selavac emerges from the morning mist, like a vision from a peaceful dream. Its houses arranged around courtyards that facilitate both family privacy and community interaction. Here, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of specialized craft production on a scale that suggests not just local consumption, but trade with distant communities. The pottery workshops of Selavac produced vessels of exceptional quality, their surfaces decorated with symbolic inscriptions that may have served as ancient trademarks or indicators of origin. Allow yourself to drift through these prehistoric workshops, feeling the creative energy that filled spaces where skilled artisans transformed raw materials into objects of lasting beauty and utility. The rhythmic sound of pottery wheels mingles with the gentle conversation of workers who take obvious pride in their craft. Apprentices learn through careful observation and patient practice, absorbing not just technical skills, but the symbolic traditions that give meaning and identity to their community's products. Further along the river's course lies Plochnik, another major Vinča center that reveals the remarkable technological achievements of these prehistoric Europeans. Here, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of Europe's earliest known urban planning, with residential areas, craft quarters, and ceremonial precincts arranged according to sophisticated organizational principles. The inhabitants of Plochnik had mastered advanced metallurgical techniques, creating copper implements that display both functional excellence and artistic sophistication. Picture the workshops of Plochnik as evening settles over the settlement, their furnaces glowing like terrestrial stars in the gathering darkness. Master metalworkers, their faces illuminated by forge fire, shape copper into tools and ornaments that will be traded across hundreds of miles of prehistoric Europe. Some of these metal objects bear symbolic inscriptions that echo the markings found on pottery and other artifacts, suggesting that the Vinča writing system was sophisticated enough to be applied across different materials and contexts. The Danube itself served as the great unifying element that made this far-flung network of communities possible. Picture the river in its prehistoric abundance, its waters teeming with fish, its banks lined with the reeds and willows that provided raw materials for countless crafts. Wooden boats moved along its current, carrying not just goods and people, but ideas and innovations that spread the Vinča cultural tradition across southeastern Europe. These ancient vessels, their hulls shaped by techniques passed down through generations of river peoples, carried precious cargoes that reveal the remarkable extent of Vinča trade networks. Obsidian from distant volcanic regions traveled hundreds of miles to reach Vinča settlements, where it was worked into tools of exceptional sharpness and beauty. Precious stones, rare minerals, and exotic shells made similar journeys, speaking to trade relationships that spanned the continent. But perhaps the most important cargo carried by these prehistoric traders was not material goods, but the symbolic traditions that unified Vinča culture across its vast geographic range. The consistency of symbolic forms found at sites separated by hundreds of miles suggests a level of cultural communication and standardization that required regular contact and exchange between distant communities. Let yourself imagine the arrival of one of these trading expeditions at a riverside settlement. The excitement that must have filled the community as boats appeared around the river's bend, their hulls loaded with exotic goods and their crews bearing news from distant lands. Feel the anticipation as community members gathered at the landing place, eager to see what treasures the traders had brought and to hear stories of other settlements along the great river's course. The trading process itself may have relied heavily on symbolic communication, with standardized marks serving to indicate quantities, qualities, or exchange values of different goods. The symbols we find on Vinča artifacts may include the earliest known examples of commercial notation, representing humanity's first attempts to create written records of economic transactions and trade relationships. As night settles over this network of ancient communities, fires kindle in settlements scattered across hundreds of miles of river valley, each one a point of light in the prehistoric darkness, each one connected to its neighbors by the invisible threads of trade, communication, and shared cultural tradition. The symbols that we have been exploring served as a kind of ancient internet, a communication system that allowed widely separated communities to maintain their cultural unity while adapting to local conditions and opportunities. The remarkable longevity of the Vinča cultural tradition, spanning nearly a millennium, testifies to the effectiveness of these communication networks. Ideas, innovations, and artistic traditions could spread rapidly along the river routes, ensuring that advances made in one community would quickly benefit all members of the cultural complex. This prehistoric globalization created a level of cultural sophistication that would not be seen again in Europe for thousands of years. Rest now in the gentle darkness, letting your consciousness drift like a leaf on the current of this ancient river, carried past settlement after settlement, where the fires are banking low and the day's activities are giving way to the peaceful rhythms of sleep. The great centers of Vinča civilization rest peacefully in the night, their inhabitants secure in their sophisticated communities, their mysterious symbols waiting patiently for dawn to reveal them once again. In our next chapter, we will explore what happened to this remarkable civilization following the gradual changes that led to its eventual disappearance and the silence that settled over the Danube Valley as the Vinča cultural tradition faded into the mists of prehistory. Time moves like the slow erosion of riverbanks, imperceptible from day to day, but inexorable over the centuries, carrying away even the mightiest civilizations, grain by grain, until only whispers remain in the archaeological record. As you rest in the gentle darkness, let yourself drift forward through the millennia to witness one of history's most poignant mysteries, the gradual fading of the Vinča civilization that had flourished so brilliantly along the Danube's ancient shores. Picture the great settlements we have visited beginning to show the first subtle signs of change, like the barely perceptible shift in light that marks the transition from late afternoon to early evening. Around 4,500 years before our Common Era, after nearly a millennium of remarkable cultural achievement, something began to alter the rhythm of life in the Vinča communities. The changes came slowly at first, so gradually that individual generations might not have noticed the transformation that was quietly reshaping their world. Breathe deeply and let yourself sense the atmosphere of a Vincha settlement during these transitional times. The houses still rise majestically from their earthen foundations. The workshops still hum with creative activity, and the mysterious symbols still appear on pottery and other artifacts with the same careful attention to meaning and placement that had characterized their creation for countless generations. Yet, beneath this surface continuity, currents of change flow like underground streams, gradually altering the landscape of daily life in ways that only become apparent when viewed across the longer perspective of historical time. Archaeological evidence suggests that the population of many Vinca settlements began to decline during this period, though the process unfolded gradually over several centuries rather than through sudden catastrophic events. Houses that had once sheltered large extended families were abandoned or divided into smaller living spaces. Craft workshops that had produced goods for trade across hundreds of miles reduced their output or specialized in different types of products that reflected changing circumstances and opportunities. The reasons for this gradual transformation remain one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles, debated by scholars who offer various theories to explain the disappearance of Europe's most sophisticated prehistoric civilization. Climate change may have played a role, as evidence suggests that the stable weather patterns that had supported Vinca agriculture for nearly 1,000 years began to shift during the fifth millennium before our era. Let yourself feel the subtle changes that climate variation might have brought to the Danube Valley. Picture seasons that arrived at unexpected times, summers that were too dry or too wet for optimal crop production, winters that lasted longer than usual or brought unexpected warmth that disrupted the natural cycles upon which agricultural communities depended. These gradual environmental changes would have required constant adaptation, forcing communities to modify practices that had served them successfully for countless generations. Population pressure may have contributed to the challenges facing Vinca society during its final centuries. The success of their agricultural and social systems had supported steady population growth over many generations, and eventually, this growth may have exceeded the carrying capacity of their river valley environment. Competition for the best agricultural land might have intensified, forcing some communities to relocate to less favorable areas or to modify their subsistence strategies in fundamental ways. Picture the peaceful river valleys becoming more crowded as generations passed, with settlements expanding and new communities established in areas that had previously been left to wild forests and meadows. Feel the gradual shift from abundance to scarcity as more people competed for the same limited resources, creating social tensions that had been unknown during the early centuries of Vinca prosperity. Migration and cultural contact with other prehistoric peoples may have accelerated the changes affecting Vinca society. Archaeological evidence suggests that new groups, carrying different technologies and cultural traditions, began to appear in southeastern Europe during the fifth millennium before our era. These newcomers brought with them different approaches to agriculture, different styles of pottery and metalworking, and perhaps most significantly, different systems of symbolic communication that gradually replaced the mysterious Vinca script. Imagine the complex dynamics that must have characterized these cultural encounters, as established Vinca communities encountered peoples with different languages, different religious traditions, and different ways of organizing social life. Some interactions were undoubtedly peaceful, involving trade and intermarriage that enriched both cultures. Others may have been more competitive, as different groups vied for control of the most desirable agricultural lands and strategic locations along the river routes. The process of cultural change was probably gradual and varied from region to region, with some communities maintaining traditional Vinca practices longer than others. Picture settlements where traditional pottery styles persisted alongside newer forms introduced by migrant peoples, where ancient symbolic traditions gradually gave way to new forms of communication and record keeping, where the old ways blended with new influences to create hybrid cultures that retained some elements of Vinca civilization while adapting to changing circumstances. As the centuries passed, the distinctive characteristics that had defined Vinca culture for nearly a millennium began to fade like colors in ancient textiles exposed to too much sunlight. The sophisticated pottery styles that had been the pride of Vinca artisans gave way to simpler forms that reflected different aesthetic traditions and technical approaches. The complex metallurgical techniques that had made Vinca metalworkers famous throughout prehistoric Europe were replaced by new methods introduced by peoples who had developed different approaches to working copper and other metals. Most poignantly for our story, the mysterious symbols that had served as a communication system for so many generations gradually disappeared from the archaeological record. The last known examples of Vinca script date to approximately 4,000 years before our era, marking the end of what may have been Europe's earliest experiment with written communication. Feel the weight of this loss as you contemplate the silence that settled over the symbols, their meanings dying with the last people who could interpret their ancient messages. Yet, the disappearance of Vinca civilization was not a sudden catastrophe, but a gradual transformation, like autumn changing slowly into winter through a series of almost imperceptible shifts. Some communities simply merged with incoming populations, their descendants carrying forward selected elements of traditional knowledge while adapting to new cultural frameworks. Others may have migrated to regions where traditional ways could be maintained longer, spreading Vinca influences to areas that had not previously experienced this sophisticated cultural tradition. The great settlements that had been the pride of prehistoric Europe did not fall to conquest or natural disaster, but slowly emptied as their inhabitants made pragmatic decisions about where and how to live in a changing world. Picture the last families departing from houses that had sheltered their ancestors for generations, carrying with them what portable goods they could manage while leaving behind the heavy pottery vessels and large implements that had once been symbols of prosperity and permanence. Archaeological layers from this period show a gradual decline in the quantity and quality of material culture, reflecting communities under stress, but not necessarily in crisis. Life continued in the Danube Valley, but it was a different kind of life, organized according to different principles and expressed through different material traditions. The complex social hierarchies and specialized craft production that had characterized classic Vinca culture gave way to simpler, more flexible arrangements that were better suited to the uncertainties of a changing world. As the last Vinca symbols were inscribed onto pottery vessels that would survive in the earth for thousands of years, their creators could not have imagined that they were closing a chapter in human history that would not be reopened until the development of classical civilizations in Greece and Rome. The knowledge of how to read and interpret the symbols died with the communities that had created and maintained them, leaving behind only the mute testimony of marked artifacts waiting for future archaeologists to rediscover and attempt to decipher. The silence that settled over the Danube Valley as Vinča civilization faded was not empty, but full of potential, like the pause between musical movements that makes the next passage more meaningful. The achievements of the Vinča people, their sophisticated agriculture, their advanced crafts, their possible experiments with written communication, did not vanish without trace, but became part of the cultural foundation upon which later European societies would build their own achievements. Let yourself drift peacefully through this transition, feeling not sadness at the passing of the Vinča civilization, but gratitude for the remarkable legacy they left behind. Their symbols, preserved in clay and bone and stone, continue to speak across the millennia, challenging our assumptions about prehistoric capabilities and reminding us that human creativity and intelligence have been constant companions throughout our species' long journey through time. The great river continues to flow as it has for millions of years, carrying new sediments to cover the remains of ancient settlements, nurturing new generations of people who build their own communities and pursue their own dreams along its fertile banks. Yet somewhere beneath the accumulated layers of soil and time, the symbols of Vinča wait patiently in the darkness, holding their secrets with the same patience that has characterized their 7,000-year journey from creation to rediscovery. As you prepare to explore the scholarly attempts to unlock these ancient mysteries, let yourself sink deeper into the peaceful current of this story, carried by the gentle flow of time toward our next chapter, where we will examine the various theories and hypotheses that modern researchers have proposed to explain the meaning and significance of Europe's most ancient symbolic communication system. Picture yourself floating gently into a vast library where the accumulated wisdom of centuries rests quietly on endless shelves, where the soft rustle of turning pages mingles with the hushed conversations of scholars pursuing the eternal human quest to understand our origins. Here, in the peaceful sanctuaries of universities and research institutes around the world, brilliant minds have dedicated their careers to unlocking the secrets of the Vinča symbols, approaching these ancient mysteries with the same patient reverence that archaeologists bring to their excavations. The debates surrounding the Vinča symbols unfold like a gentle intellectual symphony, with different scholars contributing their unique perspectives and interpretations to create a rich tapestry of theoretical possibilities. Let yourself drift through these scholarly discussions, feeling not the heat of academic controversy, but the warm glow of human curiosity directed toward one of archaeology's most fascinating puzzles. Among the most prominent voices in these debates is Dr. Harold Harmon, whose extensive research has led him to propose that the Vinča symbols represent nothing less than humanity's earliest writing system, a fully developed method of recording language that predates the famous scripts of Mesopotamia and Egypt by over 2 millennia. Picture Dr. And Harmon in his study, surrounded by photographs and drawings of Vinča artifacts, his eyes bright with the excitement of discovery as he traces connections between symbols that might unlock the secret of prehistoric European literacy. According to this interpretation, the Vinča signs constitute a true script capable of recording the full range of human thought and communication. Harmon and his supporters point to the complexity and consistency of the symbolic system, noting that the nearly 700 documented symbol variants display the kind of systematic organization that characterizes genuine writing systems throughout history. They argue that the deliberate placement of symbols on artifacts, their frequent combination in apparently meaningful sequences, and their wide distribution across the Vinča cultural area all support the hypothesis that these ancient Europeans had developed functional literacy thousands of years before similar achievements in other parts of the world. Feel the weight of this possibility as you contemplate its implications. If Harman and his colleagues are correct, then quiet villages along the prehistoric Danube were the birthplace of one of humanity's most important innovations. Children learning their symbols from parents and teachers, craftspeople marking their products with standardized inscriptions, community leaders maintaining records of important decisions and transactions, all participating in a literate culture whose very existence challenges our fundamental assumptions about the development of human civilization. Yet other scholars approach the Vinča symbols with equal expertise but different conclusions, their voices adding counterpoint to the symphony of interpretation that surrounds these ancient mysteries. Dr. Sean Wynne and other researchers argue that while the Vinča symbols clearly represent a sophisticated communication system, they may not constitute true writing in the technical sense that linguists and archaeologists use that term. Picture these alternative theorists in their own scholarly settings, equally passionate about unlocking the secrets of the past, but approaching the evidence through different analytical frameworks. They suggest that the Vinča symbols might represent what scholars call proto-writing, a symbolic communication system that could convey meaning but had not yet developed the phonetic elements necessary to record the sounds of spoken language directly. According to this interpretation, the Vinča symbols functioned more like the pictographic systems used by some Native American societies, or the symbolic notation systems employed by various ancient cultures for specific purposes like recording astronomical observations or ritual instructions. These systems could communicate complex information effectively while remaining fundamentally different from the phonetic writing systems that eventually developed in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and other centers of ancient literacy. Let yourself drift through the gentle currents of this scholarly debate, feeling not confusion, but wonder at the richness of human intellectual achievement that allows multiple valid perspectives to coexist while pursuing truth through patient investigation and careful reasoning. Both interpretations acknowledge the remarkable sophistication of Vinča culture, while differing in their assessment of how that sophistication should be characterized and understood. A third group of scholars approaches the Vinča symbols through the lens of religious and ceremonial interpretation, suggesting that these mysterious marks served primarily sacred rather than secular functions within prehistoric European society. Dr. Maria Gimbutas, whose groundbreaking work on Neolithic European religion has influenced generations of researchers, proposed that many Vinča symbols represent elements of an ancient goddess-centered spirituality that emphasized fertility, regeneration, and the sacred feminine principles that she believed dominated prehistoric European religious thought. From this perspective, the symbols inscribed on pottery vessels and clay figurines were not attempts to record everyday language, but expressions of sacred knowledge, magical formulas, or ritual instructions that connected their users to the divine forces that governed the natural world. Picture ancient priestesses or ritual specialists carefully inscribing these sacred marks onto ceremonial objects, their movements guided not by the practical concerns of record-keeping, but by the profound spiritual significance of each symbol within their religious framework. This interpretation draws support from the frequent appearance of Vinča symbols on figurines that clearly had religious or ceremonial functions, as well as their presence on pottery vessels that may have been used in ritual contexts rather than everyday domestic activities. The careful placement and artistic integration of symbols into these sacred objects suggests that their meaning transcended mere practical communication to touch the deepest spiritual concerns of Vinča society. Yet another perspective emerges from scholars who focus on the social and economic functions that symbolic communication might have served within prehistoric European communities. These researchers suggest that the Vinča symbols operated as a kind of ancient identification system, marking ownership of valuable objects, indicating the origin or quality of traded goods, or serving as signatures that identified individual craftspeople and their products. Feel yourself moving through a prehistoric marketplace where this interpretation might apply, watching as traders examine pottery vessels marked with symbols that indicate their origin, quality, or intended use. Picture craftspeople carefully inscribing their personal marks onto finished products, creating a system of attribution and quality control that facilitated trade across the extensive network of Vinča settlements we explored in our previous chapter. This economic interpretation draws strength from the distribution patterns of symbol-bearing artifacts, which often concentrate around areas that show evidence of intensive craft production or trade activity. The standardization of certain symbolic forms across widely separated archaeological sites suggests that these marks served functions that required recognition and understanding across different communities and regions. Among the most intriguing evidence in the scholarly debates surrounding Vinča symbols are the famous Tortoria tablets, 3 small clay plaques discovered in Romania and dated to approximately 5,300 years before our era. These remarkable artifacts bear symbols that clearly relate to the Vinča tradition, but appear in combinations that some scholars interpret as complete inscriptions, perhaps even narrative text recorded in humanity's earliest writing system. Let your imagination carry you to the moment when these extraordinary tablets were first uncovered, their surfaces still bearing the clear impressions of symbols inscribed by ancient hands over 7,000 years ago. The precision and deliberate arrangement of marks on these tablets suggests careful composition, as if their creator was recording specific information that needed to be preserved in permanent, retrievable form. The Tortoria tablets have become central pieces of evidence in the debate over Vinča literacy, with different scholars interpreting them as support for various theories about the nature and function of prehistoric European symbolic communication. Some see them as clear examples of true writing, while others interpret them as religious or ceremonial objects whose symbols served sacred rather than linguistic functions. As scholarly research has continued into the 21st century, new analytical techniques have been brought to bear on the Vinča symbol mystery. Computer analysis of symbol patterns and distributions has revealed statistical regularities that some researchers interpret as evidence of grammatical structures, while others see them as reflecting the natural patterns that emerge in any systematic symbolic communication method. The application of modern linguistic analysis to the Vinča corpus has yielded fascinating insights into the structure and organization of the symbolic system, though it has not yet produced the breakthrough that would allow definitive decipherment of the ancient script. Each new analytical approach brings fresh perspectives and methodologies to bear on these ancient mysteries, gradually building a more complete understanding of how the symbols functioned within their original cultural context. Feel yourself drifting peacefully through these scholarly investigations, carried not by the urgency of academic competition, but by the gentle persistence of human curiosity that drives all great intellectual achievements. The researchers who dedicate their careers to understanding Vinča symbols are motivated by the same impulse that drove their prehistoric subjects to create these mysterious marks in the first place: the fundamental human need to communicate, to preserve meaning, and to connect across the barriers of time and space. The various interpretations of Vinča symbols are not mutually exclusive, but may represent different aspects of a complex communication system that served multiple functions within prehistoric European society. Perhaps some symbols recorded economic information while others preserved sacred knowledge. Perhaps the system evolved over its thousand-year history, beginning as simple identificatory marks and gradually developing into more sophisticated forms of communication that approached true literacy. The ongoing scholarly debates remind us that the past is not a fixed landscape, but a living territory that reveals new features each time we approach it with fresh questions and improved methodologies. The Vinča symbols continue to challenge and inspire researchers, offering tantalizing glimpses of prehistoric European achievements while maintaining their essential mystery, like ancient sphinxes guarding the secrets of humanity's intellectual development. As you rest here in the peaceful darkness, let the various theories and interpretations blend together like harmonious voices in a distant choir, each contributing its unique perspective to our understanding of these remarkable ancient achievements. The truth about the Vinča symbols may incorporate elements from all these scholarly approaches, revealing a communication system that was simultaneously practical and sacred, local and widespread, simple in its basic elements, but sophisticated in its applications and implications. In our next chapter, we will explore the lasting influence of these mysterious symbols, discovering how their legacy continues to inspire and inform our understanding of human creativity and communication thousands of years after their meanings were lost to time. There is something deeply moving about objects that outlive their creators, artifacts that carry forward through time the careful intentions of hands that have long since returned to dust. As you rest in the gentle darkness, let yourself contemplate the extraordinary journey of the Vinča symbols, from their creation in prehistoric workshops to their rediscovery in modern museums. A passage through time that speaks to the enduring power of human creativity to transcend the boundaries of mortality and historical change. Picture yourself walking through the quiet galleries of the National Museum in Belgrade, where the soft lighting creates pools of reverence around display cases that hold some of the most important Vinča artifacts ever discovered. Here, fragments of pottery that once held the daily meals of prehistoric families now serve as windows into humanity's earliest experiments with symbolic communication. The symbols inscribed on these ancient surfaces seem to glow with their own inner light, as if the intentions of their creators continue to pulse through the ceramic matrices that have preserved them across the millennia. Feel the profound connection between past and present as modern visitors pause before these displays, their eyes tracing the mysterious markings with the same wonder that must have filled the first archaeologists to recognize their significance. Children press their faces close to the glass, unconsciously mimicking the gesture of ancient Vinča children who might have watched their parents inscribe similar symbols onto wet clay 7,000 years ago. The continuity of human curiosity bridges the vast gap of time, creating invisible bonds between prehistoric symbol makers and contemporary symbol interpreters. The influence of the Vinča discoveries extends far beyond the confines of archaeological scholarship, inspiring artists, writers, and creators across diverse fields of human expression. Contemporary Serbian artists have incorporated Vinča motifs into paintings, sculptures, and jewelry that celebrate their prehistoric heritage while creating new meanings for ancient forms. Let yourself drift through galleries where modern interpretations of Vinča symbols bloom like flowers in a contemporary garden, their ancient roots nourishing entirely new forms of artistic expression. Picture a potter working in a modern studio, her hands shaping clay with techniques that echo those used by Vinča artisans thousands of years ago, yet incorporating the mysterious symbols into contemporary designs that speak to both historical continuity and artistic innovation. Feel the satisfaction in her movements as she inscribes ancient forms onto modern vessels, creating objects that serve as bridges between prehistoric achievement and contemporary creativity. The Vinča symbols have also captured the imagination of writers and storytellers who see in these mysterious marks the raw material for narratives that explore fundamental questions about human communication, cultural memory, and the relationship between past and present. Novels, poems, and screenplays have drawn inspiration from the enigmatic quality of symbols whose meanings remain tantalizingly beyond our complete understanding, using them as metaphors for the universal human experience of trying to communicate across barriers of time, culture, and individual experience. Let yourself drift through these contemporary interpretations, like a reader moving through the pages of a book that tells the same story from multiple perspectives, each voice adding new dimensions to our understanding of what the Vinča symbols might represent. Some writers imagine ancient scribes carefully recording the last messages of a dying civilization, while others envision prehistoric philosophers encoding profound truths about the nature of existence in forms that continue to challenge and inspire thousands of years after their creation. The local communities of modern Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria have embraced the Vinča heritage as an important part of their cultural identity, celebrating these prehistoric achievements through festivals, educational programs, and cultural preservation initiatives that ensure the symbol's legacy will continue to inspire future generations. Feel the warmth of community gatherings where traditional crafts are practiced and ancient techniques are taught to young people eager to maintain connections with their prehistoric ancestors. Picture village festivals where contemporary artisans demonstrate pottery techniques that echo those used in Vinča workshops, their hands moving with practiced skill as they shape clay and inscribe symbols that pay homage to their ancient predecessors. Children and adults alike participate in these celebrations, learning about their prehistoric heritage while creating new objects that carry forward the artistic traditions that have enriched this region for thousands of years. Museums throughout the Balkans have developed sophisticated interpretive programs that present Vinča culture to visitors from around the world, using advanced display techniques and interactive technologies to bring these ancient achievements to life for contemporary audiences. Walk through these modern exhibitions and feel the excitement of visitors encountering the Vinča symbols for the first time. Their amazement at discovering that Europe's earliest experiments with symbolic communication took place in their own region thousands of years before similar developments in other parts of the world. The educational impact of Vinča discoveries extends into classrooms, where teachers use these archaeological treasures to inspire students' interest in prehistory, archaeology, and the development of human communication. Picture young minds encountering the mystery of the Vinča symbols for the first time, their natural curiosity sparked by the realization that people not much different from themselves had created these mysterious marks in an age when writing was humanity's newest and most revolutionary innovation. For scholars of human communication and linguistic development, the Vinča symbols represent a crucial piece of evidence in understanding how our species developed the ability to capture thought in visible, permanent form. Whether they constitute true writing or sophisticated proto-writing, these ancient marks provide insights into the cognitive and social processes that eventually led to the complex literacy systems that characterize modern civilization. The symbols serve as a reminder that human ingenuity and creativity have ancient roots, that the impulse to communicate through visual symbols represents one of our species' most fundamental characteristics. Feel the continuity that connects Vinča symbol makers to contemporary writers, artists, and communicators, all participating in the same essential human activity of transforming intangible thoughts into tangible forms that can be shared and preserved across time. Modern digital archaeology has brought new tools to bear on the Vinča mystery, with computer analysis revealing patterns and relationships that might not be apparent to researchers working with traditional analytical methods. Picture teams of scholars using advanced software to search for statistical regularities in symbol distribution, frequency patterns that might reveal grammatical structures, or compositional rules that governed how individual symbols were combined into more complex expressions. These technological approaches have yielded fascinating insights while maintaining the essential mystery that makes the Vinča symbols so compelling. Each new analytical technique reveals additional layers of complexity within the symbolic system, suggesting that its creators possessed sophisticated understanding of communication principles that we are only beginning to appreciate fully. The symbols have also inspired philosophical reflection on the nature of meaning itself, raising questions about how significance is created, preserved, and transmitted across cultural and temporal boundaries. Contemporary philosophers and theorists of communication find in the Vinča symbols a perfect case study for exploring how human societies develop shared systems of meaning and how those systems adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential functions. Picture yourself in a quiet seminar room where scholars gather to discuss not just the technical aspects of the Vinča symbols, but their broader implications for understanding human consciousness, creativity, and cultural development. Feel the intellectual excitement that fills these discussions as participants realize that these ancient marks touch on some of the most profound questions about what makes us human and how our species has managed to create and maintain the complex symbolic systems that characterize all advanced civilizations. The legacy of the Vinča symbols extends even into contemporary discussions about artificial intelligence and digital communication, where researchers study how humans first learned to encode meaning in symbolic systems as they work to develop technologies that can understand and generate human-like communication. The prehistoric European achievement in creating systematic symbolic communication provides historical perspective on our current efforts to build machines that can participate in the symbolic activities that have distinguished human culture for thousands of years. As you float through these contemporary reflections on ancient achievements, feel the profound continuity that connects prehistoric symbol makers to modern symbol users, all participating in the ongoing human adventure of creating meaning through visual and linguistic representation. The Vinca symbols remind us that this capacity for symbolic thought and communication represents one of our species' most distinctive and powerful abilities, one that has enabled all the remarkable achievements of human civilization. The mystery of the Vinca symbols continues to evolve as new discoveries emerge from ongoing archaeological investigations throughout southeastern Europe. Each new artifact adds another piece to the puzzle, while advances in analytical techniques provide fresh perspectives on evidence that has been studied for over a century. The symbols remain patient teachers, revealing their secrets gradually to each generation of researchers who approach them with appropriate reverence and scientific rigor. Rest now in the knowledge that these ancient achievements continue to enrich our understanding of human potential and creativity, their influence flowing like the eternal current of the Danube itself through the landscapes of scholarship, art, and cultural celebration that they continue to inspire. The symbols of Vinca have transcended their original functions to become universal symbols of human ingenuity, reminding us that the capacity for innovation and meaning creation has been our constant companion throughout the long journey of our species through time. In our final chapter, we will return to the prehistoric workshops where these symbols were born, imagining the quiet moments when ancient hands first learned to capture thought in permanent, visible form, and reflecting on the eternal human desire to communicate across the vast expanses of time and space that separate one generation from another. As our gentle journey through time draws toward its peaceful conclusion, let yourself drift back once more to that magical moment 7,000 years ago when human consciousness first learned to make itself visible in permanent form. Picture yourself floating like evening mist through the quiet workshops of a Vinca settlement, where the day's activities are winding down and the soft glow of firelight illuminates the concentrated faces of artisans pursuing their ancient crafts. The air is warm and still, carrying the earthy scent of clay and the subtle smokiness of carefully tended fires. In one corner of the workshop, a master potter sits cross-legged before her wheel, her movements flowing with the meditative rhythm of someone who has spent decades perfecting her art. Her hands shape the clay with unconscious expertise, but tonight there is something different about her work, something that sets this evening apart from countless others in her long career. Feel the weight of intention that fills this quiet space as she pauses in her shaping to reach for a slender bone stylus, its surface polished smooth by years of use. Watch as she considers the wet surface of her newly formed vessel, her eyes moving across its curves with the deliberate attention of someone about to make a mark that will endure far beyond her own lifetime. In this moment, she stands at the threshold between prehistory and history, between the age of purely spoken communication and the dawn of visible language. The symbol she chooses to inscribe emerges slowly beneath her careful tool, each line deliberate and purposeful. Perhaps it is a simple cross, humanity's earliest geometric expression of the sacred intersection between earth and sky, physical and spiritual, known and unknown. Or perhaps it is something more complex, a combination of marks that captures a concept, a name, an idea that she wishes to preserve in the permanent medium of fired clay. Breathe deeply and feel the significance of this moment rippling outward through time, like the concentric circles that spread from a stone dropped into still water. This anonymous artisan, whose name is lost to history, but whose symbol survives to puzzle and inspire us thousands of years later, is participating in one of humanity's most profound innovations. She is learning to make thought visible, to give permanent form to the fleeting patterns of consciousness that distinguish our species from all others. Around her in the workshop, other craftspeople are engaged in similar acts of creation and communication. A young apprentice carefully observes her master's technique, not just learning how to shape clay, but absorbing the symbolic traditions that give meaning to their community's material culture. An elderly specialist in sacred objects inscribes complex combinations of symbols onto ceremonial figurines, his movements guided by decades of experience in encoding spiritual knowledge in permanent, retrievable form. The workshop falls into the kind of peaceful concentration that accompanies truly meaningful work, the quiet focus that emerges when skilled hands and trained minds collaborate in pursuit of something larger than immediate practical needs. These artisans understand, perhaps without being able to articulate it fully, that they are participating in something revolutionary, something that will change forever the way human beings relate to knowledge, memory, and meaning. Let yourself feel the texture of wet clay beneath your own imaginary fingers, the slight resistance it offers to the stylus, the satisfaction of seeing a clear symbol emerge from formless material. This is the tactile experience of creating meaning, of transforming abstract thought into concrete form that can survive the passage of centuries. Each mark requires commitment, a decision to make permanent what might otherwise remain ephemeral and forgotten. As the evening deepens and the workshop grows quieter, the symbolic inscriptions on drying pottery catch and reflect the firelight like captured stars, their meanings dancing in the interplay of flame and shadow. The symbols seem to whisper across the ages, speaking in a language that hovers just beyond the edge of understanding, yet somehow communicates something essential about the human condition and our eternal desire to reach across the barriers that separate one consciousness from another. Picture the moment when these inscribed vessels will be placed in the firing kiln, where the intense heat will transform both clay and symbols into permanent artifacts capable of surviving millennia. Feel the anticipation that must fill the workshop as the artisans prepare their creations for this final transformation, knowing that their symbols will emerge from the fire as enduring messages to whatever future might discover them. The firing process itself takes on almost magical significance as you imagine it unfolding in the prehistoric night. The kiln glows like a terrestrial volcano, its intense heat visible from throughout the settlement, drawing community members who gather to witness this weekly transformation of earth into art. Children watch wide-eyed as their parents tend the fires, learning through observation the precise control of temperature and timing that will determine whether the firing succeeds or fails. As dawn breaks over the ancient settlement, the kiln is allowed to cool slowly while the community waits with patient anticipation for the moment when the fired pottery can be safely removed. Picture the reverent care with which each piece is examined, the quiet satisfaction that fills the workshop as perfectly fired vessels emerge from the cooling kiln, their surfaces bearing symbols that have now been transformed into permanent features of imperishable ceramic. These newly fired artifacts will find their way into homes throughout the settlement, where they will serve practical functions while carrying their symbolic messages through the daily routines of Vinča life. Some will hold grain or water, others will serve ceremonial purposes, and still others may function primarily as vehicles for symbolic communication, their inscriptions more important than their practical utility. Years pass in the quiet rhythm of seasonal change, and the symbols continue to accumulate in workshops throughout the Vinča cultural area. Each generation of artisans adds their own contributions to the growing corpus of symbolic communication, sometimes innovating new forms, sometimes preserving ancient traditions with careful fidelity. The symbolic system evolves and adapts while maintaining its essential character, growing like a living language that responds to the changing needs of the communities it serves. Feel the poignancy of the moment when the last Vinča symbol is inscribed onto a pottery vessel, when the final practitioner of this ancient tradition makes what will prove to be the last mark in a communication system that had served European communities for nearly a millennium. This anonymous artisan could not have known that their symbol would be the last, that the knowledge of how to read and interpret the ancient marks would die with their generation, leaving future archaeologists to puzzle over meanings that had once been as clear and functional as spoken words. Yet there is something profoundly hopeful about the survival of these symbols through the long darkness of prehistory to their rediscovery in modern times. They remind us that human achievements, once created with sufficient care and skill, can transcend the civilizations that produced them to speak across vast expanses of time, to audiences their creators could never have imagined. The symbols waiting patiently in the earth through thousands of years of historical change, surviving the rise and fall of empires, the development and disappearance of languages, the transformation of entire landscapes through human activity and natural process. They endured floods and droughts, wars and migrations, the coming of agriculture and the Industrial Revolution, maintaining their essential integrity while the world changed completely around them. Consider the miracle of preservation that allowed these ancient messages to survive until the moment when human knowledge had advanced sufficiently to recognize their significance and begin the long process of interpretation. The symbols seem to have been waiting for exactly the right moment to reveal themselves, emerging from the earth just when archaeological science had developed the tools and techniques necessary to appreciate their importance and begin unlocking their secrets. As you rest here in the peaceful darkness, let the image of those ancient workshops fade gently into the realm of dreams, carrying with you the sense of profound connection to the prehistoric artisans who first learned to make thought visible in permanent form. Their symbols continue to whisper across the millennia, speaking not in words we can understand, but in the universal language of human creativity and the eternal desire to communicate meaning that transcends individual mortality. The mystery of the Vinča symbols reminds us that every act of communication, from the most sophisticated literary work to the simplest text message, participates in the same fundamental human activity that began in those quiet workshops along the prehistoric Danube. We are all inheritors of the tradition those ancient symbol makers initiated, all participants in the ongoing human experiment with making meaning visible and permanent. Feel yourself drifting deeper into the peaceful current of sleep, carried by the gentle flow of this ancient story toward dreams that may be populated by firelit workshops and mysterious symbols, by prehistoric artisans whose careful hands shaped clay while encoding meanings that continue to challenge and inspire us thousands of years after their creation. Let the rhythm of the great river carry you toward rest, secure in the knowledge that human creativity and the desire to communicate across time represent threads of continuity that connect all generations in the shared adventure of consciousness seeking expression. The symbols of Vinča sleep peacefully in their museum cases and archaeological site reports, but their influence continues to flow through the world like the eternal current of the Danube itself, nourishing new generations of researchers, artists, and dreamers who find in these ancient marks inspiration for their own efforts to capture meaning in permanent, shareable form. As you join them in the peaceful realm of sleep, carry with you the whisper of ancient hands making the first tentative marks that would eventually lead to all the written wisdom and artistic expression that enriches human life today. Sleep well, gentle traveler, and may your dreams be filled with the quiet satisfaction of those prehistoric artisans who learned to make their thoughts as permanent as the stars that guided their nights, and as enduring as the great river that nurtured their remarkable civilization. The mystery of the Vinča symbols continues its patient journey through time, waiting for new discoveries and fresh insights, while preserving forever the essential human truth that consciousness seeks expression and meaning demands form.